Okay, welcome back. This is the sixth video lecture. I got kind of wound up there at the end of that last one. Um, I actually do enjoy politics, especially local politics. And in a small town or in a medium-sized town, it can be a lot of fun to start to sort of know everybody. So I guess I do get kind of excited. Particularly, my interests are in like zoning regulations and neighborhood politics, and that just came about because I guess you'd call me a neighborhood activist. Bought a house in this older part of the city and then started working to make it better, or at least from my perspective, what it meant to be making it better. Okay, so that's where we left off, talking about political action committees, special interests. In this lecture, I'll discuss or I'll talk about theory, and depending on how wound up I get there, we might move into the conversation or about some of the sociology on war, keeping in mind I am not a military or a war historian. Okay, so the theory, because politics is a large process, right? We're really only going to use two theories here, and that's the macro theories, right? Functional theory and conflict theory. And what the functional theory, remember, is all about that everything serves a purpose, that the government's role is to protect everybody, to, what does it say, protect each other and the government. We have the three checks and balances. We have the three branches, and that's all about sharing power. Each branch serves its purpose. And the system has lots of different interest groups, and that's what makes it work. And so by having the left wing groups and having the right wing groups, this is all serves the function of keeping some sort of balance, right? And so all of those groups should be given the prerogative to exist, and they all are valid, and there are good people on both sides from that sort of functional perspective, right? That if something in the system isn't working, well, then we adjust it over here, and it's through participation. And basically when people are dissatisfied with the way society is working, they should show that in the ballot box, or if you're unhappy with the system, then you need to participate. You need to run for political office, or there has been a campaign in the last few years called Run for Something, and it's a sort of it's a political party thing that's trying to encourage everybody to get involved. And my husband likes to say, if you don't vote, you can't complain, right? So anyway. Conflict theory, on the other hand, as you can probably speculate, is not quite so hopeful or optimistic. And its perspective is that the whole political system is not about the people, it's about money. And the people are not the ones making decisions, but it's the interests of capitalism. It's all about it's the money. The money calls the shots, as if money is like its own entity, right? And the process works to benefit the accumulation of wealth by the wealthy and to keep people poor, right? So because that is what is economically in the best interest of the wealthy. The power elite, or the ruling class, these are the ones that hold all the power, and they're going to make the rules to make sure they get to keep on to holding on to the power, and they really have minimal or no regard for other people. So as I say, I've already talked about that. Politicians, generals, corporate leaders, they're all the ones that are deciding what happens in politics. There is this, I don't want to say radical, but there is this extreme, maybe the phrase, I don't know if it would be the right term, but the dark state or the deep state. But there is this idea that the people that are making the decisions are not even the elected officials, but the elected officials are merely the puppets. They're the puppets of more powerful people. I think that is the idea of the deep state. So that would sort of come out of capitalism. I think I was watching a really great documentary the other day on American militia groups, for lack of a better word. And what is interesting to me, if you're at all interested in that kind of thing, is how the goals are quite similar. Conflict theories, the goals are similar. Some of the philosophies and some of the explanations are different. So I think it would be fair to say that Yeah, I think it would be fair to say that there is, that some of what am I trying to say? That conflict theory is, that both radical right and radical left probably have some ideals in common, like the mistrust of the government, right? Both groups would embrace mistrust. And the differences probably boil down to who is at fault and how to solve that problem. One camp would probably, yeah. Yeah, and I'm just going to leave it right there because I haven't completely thought through those ideas. But I remember as I was watching that documentary, thinking, "Ah, this use a little bit different words, and you could be describing a different group." Okay, so again, I am not a war historian. I am not a military historian. I'm simply going to describe the way this very broad understanding of war and terrorism from a sociological perspective. But one thing I do want to emphasize, because I am a sociologist, is the notion that war and tolerance for war and comfort with it and it as a solution to social problems is completely cultural. Not all cultures use war, right? It's not universally common. Some of the things, and so here's like some statistics, what, 160 times we've been at war since 1850. Russia's been basically at war for the last, 975 years. These are two sociologists would say that we are a warring nation. We are a warring people, and we have a tradition of war. I mean, even the founding, even our foundational stories, our foundational cultural lore, right? The American Revolution. And some have called us a war-loving culture, right? So you have a culture, you have a cultural tolerance for it, a cultural tradition of it, a cultural celebration of it. And so other cause might be that you're provoked, right? And then the fuel, what we mean by like fuel is what we would call a war machine. In other words, an economic or a production system that creates the tools of war, right? So and I think any historian will talk about what's called the war economy, or what happened after the Second World War. And it is thought, historians argue, that what got us out of the Great Depression was all the investment that went into the war, right? The Second World War. So things like aircraft industry. I mean, just down in Wichita, for instance, when we need more military warplanes, they have more jobs available. So that's what we mean by by a war machine, or fuel, right? Or profit to be made. So you put all those things together and you have a culture that's more likely to use war, as opposed to I was watching some PBS story, and it was about the Second World War. I think it was in Norway, and it was how the Queen of Norway had to leave Norway during the Second War when Germany invaded them. And her husband goes outside and says, "No, those were not Norway planes because those weren't old enough." Right. So in other words, some cultures, some nations don't have the tools that would enable them to be successful because their culture has decided not to invest in them. Okay. So you've got some objectives, right? And there's different nations go to war for different reasons. I've tried to make myself some notes here to offer examples. So like one might be power, unity, revenge, prestige. It's a nation's honor, or to defend freedom, you hear people say. Sometimes it's about the leaders, they don't want to look weak. Maybe this would be North Korea, right? They don't want to look weak. It's really not about the people. It's not about money. It's about, make me look good. Sometimes it's about controlling people or ethnic. I don't know. I was going to say, I wonder if you couldn't make an argument that this wasn't partly. Oh, I guess I'm thinking about, let's use a better example. Sudan, perhaps, when you had the South Sudanese, or what would become South Sudanese with Northern Sudanese, you've got some civil wars over extinguishing, I know, Hitler, World War II and Hitler would be a good example. And then the last one would be like conversion. And so this would be when we use the language of we want to spread democracy to the rest of the world. it's all too. I did hear a story about some ethnic minority groups in China, the Uyghurs, that's right. And the Uyghurs who are being incarcerated or rounded up, and then they are forbidden from speaking their language. I guess it's not really war, but if they don't cooperate, then maybe they would drop bombs. Okay. We also can't lose sight. Actually, I think I'm going to stop here because I've been after 10 minutes. So I will just wrap this one up right here.